Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and the Godot 4 game engine recently shipped. And alongside it, I got some interesting questions, and probably the most interesting amongst them is, why should I use the Godot game engine? And the thing is, there is a very passionate community around Godot that can sometimes be a little bit overzealous in their sales pitch. What I thought I'd do in this particular video is look at the strengths of the Godot game engine. Look at legit reasons why you may choose the Godot game engine over the two elephants in the room, that being the Unreal Engine and the Unity game engine. Now in this video, I'm going to focus on those strengths of Godot. So I'm not actually going to be talking about Godot's weaknesses, nor am I going to be talking about the strengths or weaknesses of the Unity or Unreal game engine. I'm going to be talking about Godot relative to those engines. So if there is interest, I can do follow-up videos of why you should choose the Unity game engine, why you should choose the Unreal game engine, and why you shouldn't choose those engines as well. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. So now, in no particular order, the biggest reasons why you might choose the Godot game engine over Unreal and Unity are, and the first one is, you can run it on a potato. So if you've got very restricted computing, running the Unreal Engine is not a fun prospect. Even the Unity game engine, not the biggest, best prospect out there. Whereas Godot, the game engine is like 100 megabytes in size. Even with all the templates downloaded, the installed templates, you're still looking at about a gigabyte in size. In terms of the amount of machine you need to run it, you need to have an OpenGL 3.1 compatible GPU. And that's it. Literally, that is it. You could probably run Godot on a Celeron. You could run Godot on an Android machine. It's actually available in the Google Play Store. You can run it on a Chromebook. You can even run it in a web browser. So if you're somewhat constrained in your processing ability, Godot is by far and away the smallest footprint game engine out there. Now, the next one is about as simple as explanations get. It is the only free and open source game engine of the bunch. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, wait a minute. The source code is available for Unreal Engine. Yes, it is source available, not open source. There are definite limitations on what you could do with that source code. You couldn't, in turn, make a, Unrealer engine and resell it. Whereas in Godot, you definitely could do that. Godot is under the MIT open source license. It is the only FOSS, or free open source software, or OSI, certified licensed engine out there. It's available under the MIT code license, whereas Unreal Engine source code is under a proprietary license, and you can actually get access to the Unity source code, but you've got to fork out a ton of money. Now, that ton of money is the other part of where this free kicks in. Now, all of these engines have a free tier available. Now, we're talking free as in beer, as in, cash spent. With Unreal Engine, you can make up to $1 million. And for most indies, you're never going to make $1 million, to be honest. And anything beyond that, you have to pay a 5% royalty. That's a very fair licensing scheme. Now, with the Unity game engine, they have a different approach. They don't have a royalty. Instead, they have a flat rate. The pro tier is $399 per developer per year. And that is if you make more than $100,000 a year. So again, for a lot of indie developers, there's never going to be a price tag on the Unity game engine either. And if there is, for either Unity or Unreal Engine, it's because you're making bank. So the free, as in cost aspect, isn't as important as it used to be. But definitely with Godot, you can scale your game up. You could sell 100,000 million trillion copies, and you don't have to pay anyone a cent. If you want to change the source code, you can do whatever you wish, because it is the only truly open source option of the three out there. So free and open source is definitely a big thing to some people. Now, the next thing is actually an area that I am not that interested in, but I know some people are very interested in this, and that is running on Linux. Now, you can actually run the Unreal Engine on Linux, and you can run the Unity game engine on Linux, but both of those are basically second-class citizens. There's always going to be some catches involved, or they're going to lag behind on development, etc. When it comes to Linux on the Godot game engine, I believe a lot of the lead developers on the project actually develop on the Linux operating system. It is basically the lead platform, and Linux support on Godot is as good or better than any of the other platforms it supports. So if your primary development platform is Linux, and your primary target, or your primary target is Linux, such as, say, the Steam Deck, the Godot game engine is honestly the best Linux-based implementation of the three engines. Now, if you work with Unreal or Unity on Linux and you find that I'm out of date with my impressions of it, please do let me know that in the comments down below. But from my understanding, it's not a very pleasant experience working in that operating system on those engines, whereas if you're on Linux and you're using the Godot game engine, you're going to find it a very pleasant experience. Now, this next one is kind of a strength, kind of a weakness in the same category. And what I'm talking about here is the Godot Game Engine is good enough. Simply put, the Unity and Unreal Game Engines both have more features than the Godot Game Engine. Like, it's just the truth of the matter is. They're both probably at least a decade older, and it shows. So they have a bit more mature, a bit more battle-tested than the Godot Game Engine. A lot of times in Godot, you may have one way of doing things, whereas in Unreal or Unity, you have 5. This, of course, can be a double-edged sword. Do you actually need these features? Is the Godot feature set good enough to make the game that you have in your head? If the answer is yes, a bunch of features you don't need isn't really a selling point. It just adds a layer of complexity. So if you have all the features you need and not a whole lot more, it does make the learning curve a bit easier. And for sure, if you are creating a AAA game, this is actually going to, work against you. Those tools are definitely needed in those environments. And I'm not saying those features aren't meaningful, especially on a bigger team or with a larger scale project. But for many of you, you just don't need them. The question you ultimately need to ask is Godot good enough for what I need? Again, not really a strength or a weakness, but a way to look at the Godot game engine for sure. And it's one of those things I would cover differently if I was doing this video about the things why you wouldn't choose Godot. Hopefully that made sense. Next up, and this one is very related to the last one, it's simple-ish. So, like above, if you have less features, you have less complexity. But on top of that, this carries across all the way through the Godot game engine. The node-based structure of Godot is very straightforward. It's very easy to understand. So once you've kind of concepted the idea of a hierarchy of nodes, you all of a sudden understand the leveling system, the prefab system, and everything else. It's a very easy way to learn to structure your game. Again, it could come down to opinion. You may absolutely hate the way that Godot structures your world, but the way they do it is very simple. And that is a very good strength a lot of the times. And that actually carries over to the scripting language as well, GD script. So until Unreal Engine adds its own scripting language verse, if it ever actually adds it, and since Unity long ago killed off both Boo and Unreal Script, the only option out of the box for Unity are C# and Bolt and Blueprints in C++ Unreal. So GD script is designed to be simple, domain-specific language for easily scripting game logic. So it's based loosely on the Python programming language, but the key thing about GD script, you learn it in a weekend. So it's not a long investment in learning it. Now, I know a lot of people come into a Unity with some C# ability, but if you've had no prior programming experience, you're going to pick up GD script in like a literal fraction of the time where you could pick up C#. Now, of course, you can also learn C# and use C# with the Godot game engine, and this would be under the negatives side of Godot. C# has always been a bit of a second-class citizen in the Godot ecosystem. It always trails a little bit behind, or there's always a current feature missing, or that kind of thing. So GD script really is the preferred way to program in the Godot game engine. But again, like the scene structure in Godot, it's pretty simple. And those two things combined make it easy to learn. So the simplicity also applies to the source code. And this being an open source project, for a large open source project, this is actually one of the easiest code bases I've ever encountered. So if you want to extend the source code, the C++ code, and you want to contribute back to an open source project, I find that the code base, especially for being such a large project, it's very simple. So one of the strengths for sure of the Godot game engine, it's easy to learn, it's easy to get into, it's easy to script, and it's even easy to extend, assuming you know some C++. So simple is definitely good, although sometimes it's also obviously bad. Now, another area where Godot really shines is it was designed from day one for 2D. Unreal Game Engine basically dropped their 2D support when they stopped supporting paper 2D. So if you want to develop in the Unreal Game Engine, and there's plenty of commercial 2D games out there developed in Unreal, the thing is you're rolling all of the 2D systems yourself. When it comes to Unity, Unity is much more 2D friendly. You can tell this by the huge number of shipped 2D titles out there for Unity, but they've really only recently started focusing on the 2D tooling. They kind of neglected it for years and years and years, although the App Store can make up for a ton of that discrepancy. So Unity obviously is very good for 2D as well, but with the Godot game engine, it basically started life making 2D games. So the very first titles shipped with Godot commercially were 2D titles, and it's always had a very solid 2D focus. So this means you've got built-in tile mapping tools, built-in 2D physics, you've got multiple pixel scaling modes, and you can even work in really simple, straightforward pixel units and let it take care of the rest for you. That makes working in 2D just a pleasant experience. And the final thing that I'm going to cover on is the extensibility. Now, I talked about this a little bit earlier on when I talked about how good the source code is to extend. Again, if you've never dove into the source code for the Godot Game Engine, I highly recommend doing it. Trying to extend Godot versus, say, trying to extend Unreal Engine, you're going to get up and working and hacking away at the Godot code base very quick. But the thing is, you don't have to. It's actually got, used to have something called GD Native as an extension system. Now it's got GD Extensions. It's a way to create C++ modules built on top of the Godot Game Engine, and it's the easiest extension system of the three engines, in my humble opinion. It's also the most extensive. In fact, a lot of the things written as C++ modules you would think were actually core built-in components, things like the GD script programming language. On top of that, you can actually create tools in Godot using GD script. And Godot itself, this is probably the most impressive part, the Godot Game Engine editor is actually a Godot game. So everything you're seeing in that editor is written in Godot. So it's kind of self-hosting in a way, and it gives you an idea of the sheer amount of extensions that you can do to the Godot Game Engine. And that extensibility has actually led to some really cool tools being written on top of Godot. So things like Material Maker or Pixelrama came to mind. Those were written using the Godot Game Engine. And of the three engines, I do think that the Godot engine is the most extensible. Although obviously you do have the Unreal Engine source code, so if you really wanted to, you could like fork it and do whatever you wanted with it. It's just that's a Herculean task, whereas extending the Godot is almost trivial. It's amazing how extensible it is. And that's it for the day. Really, all I want to cover is the points where I think Godot has an edge over Unity or Unreal. So we're like, why should I choose this engine over X or Y? Those are the reasons, at least in my mind. Now, obviously, some of them are my opinion. Some of them are circumstantial. So obviously, if you're trying to make a AAA game, simplicity is not a trait to you. But if you are a beginner looking to learn things, that is the exact opposite. At the same time, there's a lot of things I didn't cover, strengths of those other engines, weaknesses of the Godot Game Engine. If you'd like to see those in follow-up videos, you like this format, do let me know, and I can potentially make those videos as well. But hopefully, this video helped give you a bit of an insight over why you may or may not choose the Godot Game Engine for your future project. Let me know what you think. Comments down below, and I'll talk to you all later. Goodbye.